Well, it looks like a really good group here tonight. How is everybody?
Good.
Good? Good energy?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Sorry I'm late, but I've just been working too hard. How about you?
Same.
Same? Who's been working too hard? Everybody working too hard? I think we should adopt a new thing called heads on desks. Do you remember that at school? Part of it because I have a little bit of attention disorders and all kinds of things going on. I spent half of my childhood with my head on my desk. So I think it'd be a really great time to just relax. Yeah, because we seem to be running at full steam all the time. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to spend some time with Liggy tonight, talking about resilience, how we look at change and how we, in basic principles, are more resilient to the world around us. And sometimes I feel like feels like sometimes my head is just moving and synapsising in so many different directions. It's almost like a cartoon I start playing in my head, and it starts spinning really quickly. You know those bobbleheads that you used to see on dashboards? You know, it's almost like, it feels like that, except it's going down a very bumpy road. And it's bouncing from place to place. So we really have to begin to think about resilience. So I just wanted to kick off to get us just kind of, I guess I'm the warm-up act for Liggy, as I was saying earlier. But really just wanted to give my perspective on resilience. My name is Dale Smith, and I'm the Director of Creation for BridgeTalk and Events. So I always have the great opportunity of looking at these topics well in advance. And I do spend months prior to a BridgeTalk just thinking about stuff. You know, I don't do a presentation probably till the day before, or hours before, according to Sean. And I think a few people know me and they're saying yes. But I start thinking about them a long time before. And so what I wanted to do tonight was just walk you through some of the questions that I had around resilience. I had a really wonderful conversation with Liggy, who is our guest speaker tonight. And in the conversation with Liggy, she opened my mind up to all kinds of ideas. But it's that sharing that we can do for each other and that opening of our minds that I think gives me personal resilience. Just beginning to think about things in a very different way. Now I know this is a question that Liggy will go much deeper in, and as I say, as the warm-up act, it's really just creating a surface. And it's almost just my view of the world at the moment. The question that I've been really working on is where does resilience come from? And why do some people have it while others struggle with it? You know, I've been in a very fortunate position over the last probably 15 or 20 years working as a consultant, anywhere from sales training, leadership training, going in and out of organizations, looking at values and purpose models. And I've had I personally believe I've been given a gift. And the gift that I've been given is the ability to work with other people. And I can go through all kinds of stories about resilience and the people that I've worked with. But as I look back during my timeline, it's really beginning to look at different people that I've met. And where that question becomes really relevant is in when the people have it and when they struggle with it. Has anybody ever struggled with it? Sure, we all have. You know? And some days you wake up and you got it. I don't ever know how this sounds, but my best thinking time is in the shower in the morning. And I always get some people thinking, weirdo. But I find that is my moment when nobody touches me? No, that's wrong. Nobody calls me. But that's my time in the morning when I get up, because in the morning I get up and it's very, very habitual behavior. I get up, on goes CNN, on goes Bloomberg, and I flick between the two. I go and make my coffee and I go straight back to bed, and I spend about maybe 20, 30 minutes just watching the news, seeing how much money I lost or gained, and unfortunately recently lost. And also just what's happening in the world around me. And it's not until I get in the shower that I begin to think about me, my goals, what I want to do, and it is just a real clear opportunity that I gain my resilience. I don't wake up with resilience. Probably, I would say maybe 2% of my life I've ever woken up with resilience. It's something that I have to get as I get moving. My habitual resilience has never been huge, me as a person. I wake up generally, but then I have to turn it on. But others, people that I know, seem to have it, and they have it all the time. Now, some of it is chemical, and some of it is balance, and some of it is diet, and some of it is sleep, and there's many things, and I know Liggy's going to take us to some really great stuff, but I think it's about a personal journey, and that's what I like about these Bridge Talks, is I often take a personal journey and ask myself the question of what is the purpose of this talk. And then I started whiteboarding, as I do, a bit in a kind of mad way, and thinking, really, what is this thing called resilience? Can I buy it? Can I make it? Can I win it? Can I find it? And as all these questions started banging around my head, it kind of felt like that. Because if it's something, I want to know how I can get it. And that's why I'm personally looking forward to Liggy's talk, because she's going to give some strategies that's going to enable us to have a better understanding of it. I mean, I've spent most of my career studying behavioral science and how the brain works, and either I can bore you or excite you for hours on the subject of how all of this works. However, really, I just wanted to get down to the basics for me, is where do I get it, and where does it come from? On my personal journey, and everybody who's been to one of our Bridge Talks, and anybody who knows me personally knows I'm a mama's boy. And one of the quotes that my mom used to often say, and she was coming from a very poor family, and her raising 2 kids on her own, where we never spoke about money, simply because we didn't have it to talk about. She always said this to me whenever I came home with a skinned knee, or when I was feeling down, or left out as a child. And even to this day, I say this to myself as my own little flag. In fact, only last week I was on a train platform and the train was an hour delayed. And I heard my mum's voice say this to me, where all these other people were wandering around throwing their arms up in the air and huffing and puffing and looking for the first British rail person they could yell at. I kind of thought, wow, this is an opportunity where I could just sit and watch crazy people. It's what I did with the hour that made me resilient. I really just came right back to listening to my mom's voice. If you let the little things get you, the big stuff definitely is going to kill you. This is just the testing ground for when big challenges come. And I encourage all of you to do this, and again, I know Liggy will take you through to this in greater detail, but the question is, when did I create my view of the world? That was a big question that I wanted to explore for myself. And as I say, when I begin to think about these Bridge Talks, and I speak to people like Liggy, who's an expert in the subject, it just allows me an opportunity to ask myself some questions. And that was a question I really began to focus on. When I look through the lens of my life, when did I create my view of the world? And how did I choose to either see things positive or negatively? Where did my resilience come from? Probably in dark days. And trust me, there were lots of them. And sometimes those dark days no longer look so dark as I look back through that lens. However, as I said to you, I wake up every morning and the first thing I do is I turn on CNN.
Outside this pediatric hospital, just take a look inside. Some of these people have been waiting outside now for more than 3 days.
I've been seeing dead bodies in the streets here in Mississippi.
As far as we can see, under blue sky, it's totally level.
The drama.
Princess Diana has died.
George Zimmerman not charged with anything in this case. The terror.
About a third of the building has been blown away.
There has been a second explosion.
What normally would be the World Trade Center is no more.
That's a pretty powerful way to wake up in the morning, isn't it? And when I actually begin to look at that, one piece of research that I read many, many years ago around just media impact on our brain, and that's always stayed with me, is of all the research I've read, this little tiny phrase that I remember reading in this research was simply around how we are the media generation, is I believe what the article was called. You know, it's no longer 1950 and hunky fireman climbs up tree to save kitten. You know, and that's the news of the day. You know, we live in a world of sensationalism, a world where bad news is interesting. You know, and when we actually begin to think about how that's programming our brain, that's interesting. But the good stuff isn't. Because our brain is constantly being programmed. You know, is any NLPers in the room? Yeah, people who study neurolinguistic programming. We understand how easy it is to program a brain and change perception and create connections and look at the wiring. But if that's the way I wake up every day after speaking to Liggy, I really had to start looking at what the way I even start my day is, or at least how I frame it. Because I don't want to stop looking at that stuff. Because I don't want to lose the compassion that I have for those images. What I don't want is how it affects my resilience to go on. It's the perception in which I put on it. Because that is reality. But should reality impact my resilience to go on, or should reality allow me to be more compassionate and more empowered to not have that in my world? It's two sides of the same coin. It's whichever one you have facing upward. So, sorry, my little chicken. So, what point did my worst struggles become my strongest powers? And that was another question I just wanted to ask myself. And anybody who's seen other Bridge Talks, and I've mentioned Flyer, my pet chicken, not current, he's deceased. But when I was 13 years old, I grew up in Montreal, and I grew up in a big city, and then all of a sudden I was moved to the country, living in a farmhouse. I'm not really designed to be a farm kid. And I befriended a chicken named Flyer. Now his name was Flyer because I used to throw him up in the air and he'd fly down. To a 13-year-old kid, that made sense. Okay? And I drew the conclusion that chickens fly. No, chickens fly if they're trying to save their life. I found out later. However, I often think about Flyer like I do my mom's quotes. And I go back in time, and Flyer was my best friend. Growing up in Montreal and being a city kid, and then being transported into a whole new world that didn't exist anymore, I befriended Flyer. And it's so fascinating now as I look at resilience. Sometimes when I'm at my darkest, or I feel nervous, or I'm going on stage, I often just say, I was a kid in Albert Mines with a pet chicken named Flyer. That humbleness that it just gives me that ability to remember that in my darkest days probably gave me my most powerful. I honestly, if you had asked me when I was 13 to 15, would you change anything? I would have said, yes, I would change everything. Now, looking back, I wouldn't change anything. It made me who I am today, and if you are standing here today and would want to change anything, then you wouldn't be who you are. So we have to be resilient and be powerful in who we are, and just be thankful that whatever journey we've got us here today, it's about what we take out that makes us more powerful. And so I often joke with my own head, because if you ever see me kind of giggling away, it's because I have voices. And some of them are Flyer. Does anybody have their own Flyer? Show of hands. Somewhere in your past is your memory of something that you held on to that is probably got a little bit more power than you probably believe it ever had. And mine was my pet chicken. Another thought that I had, and I leave this with you, is we can find positives in most places if we look for them. And all I did with this one is I just even simply looked at Bridge Talks. The talks that we've done. We had Simon Lewis kick off the very first Bridge Talks with creative. And I looked at that through the lens of resilience. What Simon really talked about, and what I use in creative, is just having an open mind. When I looked at personal power, which was Duncan Slater, a double amputee that trekked to the South Pole with Prince Harry. And I looked at resilience through that lens, and I saw a man who had more motivation and determination that he could teach us. We had, when we talked about others in one of the brand talks, the resilience I get from the people around me. Vision and values. Really the whole talk around, the McCartney talk around vision and values, it was about actually having a purpose. Storytelling, our last Bridge Talks. Knowing your story, having a story, having a flyer. Because sometimes we have to have a go-to place in order to just remember where power comes from. And resilience, and again, as I say, I'm so looking forward to Liggy's talk tonight. And this is just my personal journey of how I can look through that resilience. Here's an old favorite. Have anybody seen this one before? And let's go back in time. And I remember the very first book I was ever given in management was Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And as many times as I stood on stages and quoted it as the leadership Bible, I never actually finished it. Anybody here ever finish it? End to end? Well done. But this was probably the one that impacted me most, probably because I think it's the first of the 7. And really, I use this all the time. Simply, it was given to me 20 years ago, and I've taught people on it, and I've given people it, and it's really no more different than this. Where am I now? Where do I want to be? And what am I going to do to get there? And then from that, those simple questions, I begin to activate. Because that's probably what I do in the shower most mornings, is I actually program my brain to simply say, okay, what is today going to be all about? And what can I do when I leave here to make it the best day I can make it? It's about our perception of the world is what we create. And since I didn't have an acronym, I made my own. And I finished on my whiteboard today, and I just wrote the word action on it when I thought about resilience. And I thought, well, that's no good. We got to make it stand for something. So for me, if I was actually to begin to articulate my new model, is action. Pay attention, put that attention to detail, and start with that. What do I want? Because that's the thing I'm going to be going towards. Remember, I need to be in a calm state. Nervous and negative energy just creates a heavier body, and it doesn't allow blood flow, and it doesn't allow us to be calm. And I think we talked a little bit about that, or a lot about that in our mindfulness talk. That was 2 talks ago. I'm thinking about being more mindful of how we position ourselves in the world. Think about it. Be able to just take that calm state and put it into perspective. Ignite, get the energy to move forward. But have the flexibility to not be only choosing one road. Know that I think, in my opinion, resilience comes with being able to be flexible and change and move as the world moves with us, and simply never give up. So that was my walk through resilience. And again, thanks to Liggy for the talk that we had over an hour on the telephone, just really spending some time, and it just allowed me to open up my mind to what resilience means to me and where do I get it. So now I'd like to pass you over to Liggy, who's going to also open up your minds as she did mine.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Liggy.
Thank you, Ray.